It doesn't actually matter that J.K. Rowling said a few hurtful words, right? That part fucking sucks, yes. But what matters more is that she's actively funding causes that seek to remove transgender people from public life. And all of that is done, for the most part, using polite words, right? They don't say, we don't want these disgusting trannies near our kids. They don't say, we don't want these disgusting faggots near our kids. They don't say any of that shit, right? They don't say that. They make it they try really hard to, in a very flowery way, basically be terrible. They'll look you in the face and say, people who are of this gender should not be wearing these clothes for this reason. They're not going to say what they actually feel. It's yucky. Trannies are gross. They're going to make it very, 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 very light. Very, 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 very polite, right? And that's that, right? It's a little frustrating having some of these conversations because I can tell that, there's a lot of people who their understanding of both supporting trans folks and the actual issues that people have really comes down to, well, I have a trans friend, or, well, I am trans, right? It's not the larger picture of it, which is what I've been trying to draw attention to. It's not playing the Harry Potter game. It's the fact that we're in a really scary time right now, and there are hundreds of transphobic legislations going up across the fucking country that are seeking to remove transgender people from public life. It's the fact that Donald Trump has essentially stated that this is one of his goals if he gets reelected. And the concern around transphobia isn't intensely enough in your mind for when you see something like a Harry Potter game that's overtly funded by a person who made it very clear how they feel, that you understanding that the way that things are right now doesn't allow you to, at bare minimum, be like, I'm not going to support that. That's what it is for me, because for me, it speaks to a lack of understanding of where things are and where they're going. And one thing I mentioned in passing, and I don't think people really got it, is I think people probably know so much more about this Harry Potter game than they will ever know about the legislation. Any of the legislation I'm talking about, and that's the issue, right? That our consciousness when it comes to advocating against transphobia has really ended at, these kind of empty words, right? These empty words. It's great that you are nice to your trans friend, right? Are you also understanding of the fact that there's people trying to legally limit her access? Do you get that? Do you understand that? And when I say that, it's not, we're going to force everyone to stand in line and refer to us the right way, or, prison, right? It's basic shit. It's anti-discrimination laws that make it, impossible for someone to discriminate against someone because they're trans. You get that they're trying to remove those, right? I spoke about this in my video about public life, but before we had trans protections written into the law, I could not get a normal job. I could not get a normal front-facing job. This is, 2005, 2006. I couldn't get those jobs. I would not have been able to, I overtly experienced transphobic exclusion from employment. Overtly, right? Employment's one of those things that is very delicate to me because, as I've discussed several times, I had to do survival sex work in order to make money at certain phases of my life because no one would hire me because I was trans. Those, and obviously we won't get into it here, that shit fucked my head up quite a bit. And that's the access that we have when we don't have employment protections. And I live in California. That's another part for people watching these videos I live in California, which in comparison to most places in the world, pretty accepting for trans people, right? But removing protections led to me doing that, right? Or not having protections, rather, led to me doing that. That was what my access was, right? And when they remove these laws, they're going to do it using very polite, nice words. They're not going to even be nearly as bold as J.K. Rowling, right? But what I was going to say is, you know, that's actually kind of one of the funny things about some of this, is because it does in some ways feel like we are going back to the era when I started my YouTube channel, right? Which was 2005, 2006, right? Yeah. It feels really weird because it does feel like we've changed a lot, but it's more of the same. I mean, even the nostalgia we have for that era is back, right? The style is back. It's very, 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 very strange, right? Don't hear that, but come to my page to tell me transphobic shit, right? And the thing about it is, words do have an impact, actually. They actually do. They actually do. I always think it's so funny when, you know, people from the dominant class think that trans people and minorities in general are weak-minded, because you know what I had to do in order to like survive in this society for the longest time? This is very relevant to our conversation. Not digest harmful things that were said to me as harmful. Smile in the face of hatred. That is the only way I would have been able to make it in this world, right? That's part of it. Part of being, especially a trans person, is accepting that you exist outside of most people's understandings. So you adjust to it, or you live happily in spite of it, right? That's part of being a minority in a majority space, right? You don't really get to say, hey, maybe I should get treated better, because every time you say that is treated as though you are trying to ask for something radical, because respecting you as a person, you know, is to some people very radical, right? Like, what gets me sometimes about these conversations is you actually don't need to be a person who agrees with my gender or accepts my gender. It's more so that you should, at bare minimum, accept that there are people living in this world like me who deserve the ability to have access to education, employment, and housing. Like, that's what we're fighting against right now, right? We're fighting for that, right? There are people who say, well, because I feel like you're not a woman, you don't deserve these things, and these protections are stupid, and it's just kowtowing to da-da-da, you can't cheat science, blah, 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 right? It's a whole other conversation, science. That's like, that's how science is. So this idea that something that is discovered scientifically will always remain the standard and is just the inherent truth that is unchanging is just not consistent with science, right? But of course, this person uses science as a cudgel, right? Science is supposed to be the thing that invalidates my womanhood. And when I speak for trans people, I don't try to speak for trans people just in my locale, because if I was, we would be talking about, you know, very few things. I live in California, in a big city, right? I'm worried about transgender people across the country and across the world who right now are having their rights challenged, their access to care challenged, right? Like, the idea that because someone disagrees with my gender, that I'm not going to ever be able to access hormones anymore is so crazy to me. Because you're not living my life, you're not going to exist in my body, none of these things are actually relevant to you. But what you don't want to do, and this is the issue I have, is you don't want to be in a situation where you have to engage with a trans person. You don't want to know a person who's been on hormones and who has transitioned comfortably into the gender that they identify with. That's what that's about. You get that, right? That's what that's about. It's about they just don't want to interact with those people, AKA they want to remove them from public life. Anyway.